Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Rob Manus Show, and we've got a interesting program today. Our guest has been with us before, talking about his concept to prevent veteran suicide. But we've got some updates on that, and some updates from the Veterans Affairs Department itself on their annual report that was recently released. And the news is good, but it's not all good. And that's the important part of why we wanted to get our guest on today, because veteran suicides continue to increase at a higher rate than civilians. Since 2019, the veteran suicide related deaths have increased at a greater rate than the general population of the United States and are the second leading cause of death for post 9/11 veterans, accounting for 22.3% of all deaths. A 2021 report found that 30,177 active duty personnel and veterans who served in the military after 9/11 have died by suicide. And despite hundreds of millions of dollars spent each year and the proliferation of veteran related mental health initiatives, suicide rates among veterans continue to increase. So, not surprisingly for us veterans, the Veterans Affairs Department released a report on September 19th showing trend analysis did not identify associations between onset of the pandemic and veteran suicide mortality. The decreased veteran suicide in 2020 continued a trend that began in 2019. And that this pattern was not associated with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. The VA report only serves to muddle the waters and attempts to use two isolated years to imply veteran suicide rates are improving. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Enodo Global Incorporated. Jim Cisco is a veteran and entrepreneur who has studied and developed veteran suicide prevention programs for several years now. In January 2019, Enodo Global launched its veteran suicide prevention program. The program was designed to identify high-risk veterans and interdict potential suicides. And over the next 9 months, Enodo reps met with the head of the Veterans Administration, representatives from the President's Roadmap to Empower Veterans, and in the national tragedy of suicide called Prevents Task Force, and numerous nonprofits and private sector organizations to identify funding for a 6-month pilot project. Enodo was unable to ID a resource sponsor, and the initiative was put on hold. But we have some good news to report on that front, and happy to say we're glad about it. Jim Cisco, welcome back to the Rob Manus Show, sir.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here, and look forward to talking about this really important topic.
Yeah, it's one that, as you know, is near and dear to my heart. I dealt with suicide as a commander at three different levels in the U.S. Air Force, and still have colleagues and acquaintances that I know that have either known about veteran suicides or have committed it themselves. So the frustration, I think, is pretty high on the side of veterans, no matter whether they go to the VA for medical care or what. But this report that just came out is kind of it struck me as odd, because it seemed like they were trying to say we have good news, but the numbers just don't match up. I mean, the VA report talks about a little over 6,000 veteran suicides from 2001 to 2020, but that doesn't match up from the study, numbers that I just cited in my monologue. What's the difference there? Before we get into the Enodo's program, can you help us understand what the differences are there in what organizations like yours say when, and you're not alone, and now what the VA reports showing that just came out?
Yeah, I was disappointed when I read the annual report, and basically the numbers don't jive. We've done a lot of analysis, and when we look at the reports, I can give you a handful of reports. The 2017, excuse me, the 2019 report that we used a lot of our analysis showed that there was an increase in the veteran suicides, especially post 9/11 veterans, and that increase was continuing to go up. The other analysis we used, and this was by the American Warriors Partnership that just released a study, and they had a 4-year study that was partnered with Duke and Alabama University, and the numbers that they showed were really, I mean, those were realistic numbers. And the reason I say realistic numbers is the way the VA was calculating the number of suicides really didn't accurately represent the mortality rate. So these individual states would look at the suicide rates within veterans, and their numbers were very accurate. The VA, we really don't know how they calculated the numbers, whether it was individuals who were enrolled within programs, but we know that they didn't have the specificity or the level of information that the report by America's Warrior Partnership had. And that's what's disconcerting for us, because most of the analysis that we see outside of the 2021 report by the VA show an increase in the number of veteran suicides, not a decrease. And the last thing I'll say is the VA is attributing the reduction of 2 years to their programs and initiatives. And the VA, their major incentive is to enroll veterans into their programs. And by doing so, it's a win for them.
Yeah. You know what? Look, nobody opposes the VA getting wins, but what we're all looking for is solutions and real world solutions. And that's why I wanted to get you back on again, because I've looked at your program. I've been with you as we've talked to, in my case, the Air Force about the program, and we were not successful at getting there. But it sounds like we've got some good news. Tell us about the updates on what's going on with the NOTO Veteran Suicide Prevention Program.
Sure, happy to talk about that. As you mentioned, in 2019, we launched our Veteran Suicide Prevention Program, and it really was a different way of addressing the issue. And it was really data analytics intensive, and what we attempted to do was identify high risk individuals and then put them in touch with the proper resource sponsors. Obviously, you mentioned that we didn't have success in launching the program, but over the past 2.5, 3 years, we saw how the evolution in different programs, where you see 501c3s, nonprofits stand up all the time. You see different approaches to this, but you still don't see a decrease in suicide rates. So we went back to the drawing board. We updated the proof of concept, or the Veteran Suicide Prevention Program, and we designed a proof of concept that really the focus is a little more narrow, but we believe is a really good approach. What we'll do is we will look at social media, and I can go back to some of the reports we did for Shaw Air Force Base, for the Air Force, for the Marine Corps, and we just completed a report for Elmendorf Air Force Base. And learning from those reports and analysis, we really focused this project to do two specific things. We want to understand suicide ideation and how it manifests through discussions, and then by identifying the high-risk individuals through their discussions, then interdict. And that is really, like I said, the goal of the new proof of concept.
So interdict in what way?
So the interdiction is really not what I want to say is, when we talk about interdict, is we want to put those high risk individuals with appropriate resource sponsors, and it may not always be the VA. And we have discussed this in the past. All suicide isn't a mental health illness, or it could be an economic hardship. It could be a personal relationship issue, divorce. One of the hugest issues is economic and homelessness within veterans. So when we talk about interdiction, it really is identifying that high risk individual and then putting them in touch with the appropriate resource sponsor.
Yeah, the reason I asked that, Jim, is just for the audience's sake. The Veterans Affairs report that just came out a few days ago seems to focus a lot on methodology of suicides, successful suicides, and they like to highlight that firearms are used a little bit over 70% of the time by men, and break all those demographics down. So it seems a little bit overly focused on the method versus what gets people there in the first place. And that's what I think I like about the Enodo program and the approach, and I always have, is that it's not focused on that minutia. It's although, and I'm not saying that's not important. I'm just saying that the steps that lead a person to that act are the things that we're trying to get at, so that we can provide help to stop it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And what we've seen is that the programs and the initiatives really aren't having an impact. So if we can just take a step back and look at what is, causing suicide ideation, how are these discussions manifesting? Why are, individuals choosing suicide? And understanding those behaviors is there was where you can have the greatest impact. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we have case studies, and hopefully we can discuss later on how we've identified, the nuances in
Mhm.
conversations on different social media threads, and how that really alerts us on these individuals who are thinking about suicide.
Okay. So, one more update. You mentioned in your proof of concept document that a couple of organizations, Wounded Warrior Project and the Veterans Experience Office of the VA, is very interested in the proof of concept approach. What's the good news on that? It sounds like good news. I just want you to give you that opportunity to tell my audience what the good news is on that front.
So now the good news, and I have a little more information. You know, once we launched the proof of concept, we really made a concerted effort to socialize the initiative in the private sector and the public sector. We
Mhm.
reached out to the CEO of Wounded Warrior Program, and he was very receptive to it. We've got a dialogue going on where they're looking at using Enodo services to help them with optimize their existing programs, and also introduce us to some of their partners so we can fund the proof of concept and get it going. On the with regard to the VA,
Mhm.
I'm just going to be very matter of fact. I was very disappointed in 2019 with the VA, and our engagements. Our current engagements with the VA have been very good. They are very amenable to the program, and they've offered to help us socialize the program within the VA and outside the VA.
Yeah.
And we've also reached out to government contractors in the Northern Virginia area, and we've had a couple very good discussions with companies like Peraton, who see the feasibility and the viability of the program, and
Mhm.
hopefully we'll get some more traction and move this thing forward.
Well, that's fantastic news, man. This subject is really depressing, and it's tough to do a discussion on when you're recording it for a show. But it's important information, and we want to make sure the good news is out as well as the troubling news. But so let's move on from that now that we've laid that groundwork, Jim, and tell the folks, how does the Enodo Veteran Suicide Prevention Program work?
So what I want to do is I'm going to pull up a couple of the reports and analysis, and kind of let that explain how it works. So we did and you're familiar with the Shaw Air Force Base.
Hmm.
There was a significant increase in the number of suicides in the Air Force. There were 78 in 2019, which is one every 3 days. And the Air Force Chief of Staff at the time, David Goldfein, he ordered a service-wide stand down, as you remember. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand what public perception was, what the not public perception, what the perception within the Air Force of the stand down, to see if these events or activities would have an impact or reduce the number of suicides, based upon the idea that the stand down would be used to create a dialogue between the Air Force personnel and their leadership, and understand the concerns regarding suicide. And one of the key findings was that the Shaw Air Force Base, analysis was a microcosm of the greater challenges faced by the Air Force and the military in general, and it provided a window into like the concerns and the grievances that the military members had. And basically the op tempo was the biggest issue that they were facing in the stand down, and it dominated all discussions. So it actually drew attention away from the main issue, which was veteran suicide, or suicides and military suicides and veteran suicide. That kind of reinforced our beliefs with the veteran suicide initiatives. So looking at another initiative that we did a report called Voices of Veterans. We really wanted to understand the broader veteran community. We're talking about veterans, we're talking about family members, we're talking about the disparities in perceptions between these groups and the general population. And we found that there was a huge disconnect between perception of the general public, perception of the veteran community, and veterans themselves. And that was one of the things that showed us, hey, here's the disconnect that we want to bring to the VA and help them understand some of the issues and challenges that they face. So those are two of the reports. But to answer your question, what we do looks at this whole problem in a different light. When you have mental health professionals, we've said this before, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the VA's approach really is like, most of this is a mental health issue. And as we discussed, it's really not. So the analysis really looks at the evolution of conversations and identifying how these conversations move and how they reinforce beliefs or they trigger behaviors. And that's really the biggest thing, is triggering
Right.
behavior.
Mhm. Yeah. So what triggers this behavior? What have you guys found?
It's the conversations. Well, there's a couple factors, but really what we've seen, and let me say this before I kind of go into that point. There's an old phrase, and when I was in Afghanistan, an old Afghan came up to me and said, "If you stand on the corner, the wind will tell you." Everybody likes to talk. People want to talk. They want to be heard, and there's a lot of information out there, and everybody has even every service has their own Facebook page, Twitter pages. They have chat groups, and what we've done is we've isolated these different social media outlets, different chat groups on Reddit or Discord, or
Mhm.
you using the military components, their chat groups and Windows, and isolated these outlets who have high volumes of discussions. So you can see people talking about suicide. You can talk about how a lot of chatter after suicide happens, and everybody's on it. But what we're really focusing on is looking at how the discussions about suicide evolve. Because somebody can post something about how they're depressed or they had lost their job, and then we can watch them post again and again, and we watch as the frequency of posts increase, but also as the tone changes, and you can see how people become more desperate, how they become more estranged. All of these things happen, and you can watch it happen. Imagine doing this on a national scale and partnering with Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram, and having the resources to identify these near real time and interdict. And that's where we want to go. But obviously, the proof of concept focuses on just a handful of these social media outlets that have the greatest volume of discussions,
Mhm.
and using that as our proof of concept.
So this information is publicly available.
Yeah, we're not out there, diving into people's private chat rooms, or we're, looking at metadata of individuals. This is all open source information.
Mhm.
It's what people post, what people are talking about. We've actually been invited into chat rooms, for Elmendorf Air Force Base for our last analysis,
Mhm.
and previous analysis that we've done. And because people want to talk and they want to listen and they want to be heard,
Yeah.
and it's not like you know uh, there's not a lot of information out there. It's out there.
So when an Odo's system, and it's an AI system, right? Artificial intelligence system that you've developed over the years, I believe that does this function. When that is operating, the folks that are using that, whatever that system, are they always aware that your program is on the system and operating, or is
Look,
it it depends?
let me clarify. It's not an AI system. It's a data analytics platform, but we
Okay.
use AI, and how we use AI is to understand tone and inflection and measure sentiment and understand how narratives change and evolve. And it's very sophisticated because we look at worldviews, logics of appropriateness,
Hmm.
narratives, sentiment, and the key to this is really identity, and we're able to isolate the identity of individuals. Just as well as I, when you're on active duty, your primary identity is usually, especially if you're single, is marine or sailor or
Yeah.
airman. As you get married, if you get married and you have children, then your identity changes and evolves. You
Right.
husband, father. But we're able to isolate the different identity layers and the narratives associated with them. And this really becomes important because when you really dig down deep into this, one of the factors and one of the main factors that we've learned is that one of the reasons why veterans choose to commit suicide is because they've lost their purpose or mission. When you're on active duty, you have your job, you have your mission, you have a
Yeah.
purpose. You retire, you get out, or for whatever reasons you go into the private sector, and it really doesn't have the same feeling that you did. You don't have the camaraderie, you don't have purpose, you lose
Hmm.
mission. And
Yeah.
then you see the narrative starting to evolve. He brought the war home with him, he lost his fight, see you in Valhalla. I mean, that's where we really use the AI to understand how the narratives manifest and how suicide ideation really takes hold.
But this doesn't just, I mean, suicide is not affecting just young single people that are leaving the military, that have, say they've been in the war, for a couple of terms of enlistment, decide they're going to get out. Uh, uh, so it affects family member, family people, moms, dads, because some women that are military members do commit suicide. So we shouldn't, and that have been do commit suicide. We shouldn't ignore that. So it's not just men either. So it's not just dads or husbands. It's also wives and moms, single people, and even we've seen with Vietnam veterans, even grandparents, and folks that age that come to this decision at a greater rate than the general population. So, I mean, how does that explain? Take me through how that explains, the loss of mission. Somebody that's 72 years old that was a Vietnam combat veteran in the infantry. Uh, is it because it was such an intense experience way back then that they still carry all that with them and they think about it all the time?
So you bring up a really interesting point, and there's a couple factors involved with this. But the first thing I want to touch upon is there's been too much focus, in my opinion, on post 9/11 veterans. If you look at the VA, really they're focused on post 9/11 veterans. You look at Wounded Warrior Project, they really focus on that. And you hit the nail right on the head. You can't just sit there and say it's just post 9/11 veterans that we need to focus on. It is the full spectrum of veterans, and it's different demographic groups. It's race, gender.
Yeah.
We don't discriminate and say we're only going to focus on one demographic group or one
Right.
geographic area or anything like that. With regard to the mission, here's how I'm going to answer that. As we see the evolutions in society, if we want to talk about woke culture, if we want to talk about feminism, if we want to talk about toxic masculinity, these are all things that are perpetuating for some individuals in whatever demographic group the
Hmm.
decision for suicide, especially with the younger males. The toxic masculinity and the feminism movement have really attributed to this greatly. So you have to look at these different how society is evolving and the different pressures that are triggering behavior or triggering thoughts. So this is where it really is the data analytics and parsing the data and using the AI and using the methodology to understand how it affects different individuals across different groups.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I'm constantly telling folks in my writings and in my other shows when we talk about woke culture or critical race theory, the hate of white males that's being exhibited even in government today. In Iraqi freedom, 82% of the KIAs that's killed in action for the civilians folks were white males. 82%. And between Afghanistan and Iraq, both it's 84%, and those, so all of this cultural issue attacking them when they leave, the ones that survived, when they leave the service, that's got to have an effect on that demographic. You know what I mean?
Uh,
Just like other factors will have an effect on other demographics, that has to be a major impact on those guys when they get out.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten to the point in the analysis where we can really understand that
Mhm.
and really parse that out. Right now, our goal is to launch the proof of concept, looking at a handful of social media outlets, understanding that we can identify high risk individuals. We can understand how the narratives evolve, how suicide ideation manifests, and take that proof of concept to a DoD contractor or to a 501c3 and hand it off. And the one thing that is striking in all my conversations with whomever we're talking about is everybody's like, well, how do you want to be affiliated, or what do you want? And we say, we don't want anything. And they're like, what do you mean? You don't want to have a 10-year IDIQ with the VA making 200,000 or $10 million a year for 10 years? And we're like, no, we believe, and my goal is to prove that the proof of concept is viable. It has, it can work,
Mhm.
and then hand it off and give it to a resource sponsor that has the resources to scale the program. And that's really our ultimate goal. I don't want to be, known as, or have any recognition for this whatsoever. All I want to do is get the funding, kick the program off, and prove that it works, and then hand it off to a resource sponsor.
So basically, you've invented something that you think is going to work. You're going to prove it's going to work, and then you're going to give it away.
So I'm going to
Is that
correct
right?
you. I'm going to correct you. We know it's going to work because
Yeah.
we've taken the same platform and capability and used it in other areas, and we've worked in we have a community policing program that uses the same technology. We have
Mhm.
a program for students, suicides for students. See, one of the things that we look at all these other projects. The second leading cause of death for students in the United States, I think the ages between 16 and 20 something, is the second leading cause of death is suicide. So we've done
Yeah.
work, for student suicide prevention, and we've done work, for community policing and all these other things. So we use the same technology, the same methodology, and we've proven it to be effective. And that's what's very frustrating for me, honestly, is that we've proven these things, and now it's kind of like when you talk to we've done some work in the finance sector, and they was, well, can you prove your model works? Yes. Okay. Well, show us. Okay, give us 100,000. We'll show you it works. It's a chicken or the egg, and
Yeah.
so we know it's going to work. We know it will reduce the number of suicides. We know that it will identify high risk individuals, and we're anxious to start.
So let me rephrase that. You've developed this concept. You already know it's going to work, and you're going to give it away to a resource uh,
Yes.
entity that has the resources to scale it and put it in the field so that we can
Mhm.
save lives.
All of the IP, all of the methodology, and even the platform, how we create the indexes, the
Yeah.
algorithms we use, everything.
Well, that's good news. What's the way forward as far as getting it in the field with the organizations where you're going to do the proof of concept before you can take it to a resource provider?
So we're honestly, we have the platform built. We would have to make an investment to operationalize it. We already have the feeds identified that we're going to use for the pilot program. Really, we're waiting on somebody to come forward with a check. Everything is in place. We're ready to go. We could have the program. We can have the platform operational in 7 to 10 days on the short end. More realistically, within 30 days, we'd have the platform operational. We already have the feeds, and all we would do is bring on a full-time analyst, and their job would be to monitor the platform and basically look at the data analytics, and based upon alerts and based upon other things that we use on the platform, and then run it through the methodology and come up with the findings. The idea would produce these biweekly reports for 90 days, and at the end of the 90 days, create a comprehensive report that captures everything as we went through and what we learned, lessons learned, key findings, measure the data analytics. And so like I said, we've done these reports before. We've done them for Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies. We did a report for McDonald's on order accuracy to understand how to create efficiencies in the drive-throughs. So this is something we're very familiar with and very confident that we could have produce all of the reports and analysis, once the project is complete.
So during the project, Jim, if your systems identify someone that needs help, will you have access to providers and be able to make that recommendation to the person that needs help and the provider and link those two together?
Yeah, let me just say this is a very slippery slope, and we've thought really hard about this and what our role would be. Now, if the data analytics platform picked up an individual who's on a chat group or was posting on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or doing a live feed on YouTube or whatever, saying they were going to kill themselves, we believe it's our moral responsibility to immediately notify the proper authorities, whether that be the local police. I'm not going to call the VA hotline because I'll be on hold for a couple minutes before we can actually do something. And I'm trying not to be sarcastic, but that's just
right. Because at least they have a hotline.
But that's the reality. But we really believe that it would be our responsibility to identify the local police or whomever. Now, with regard to individuals who start showing suicide ideation, would we contact them directly or would we make them known? Yes, we would make them known to the resource sponsors in the area. And is it always the VA? No, it may not always be the VA. Especially in rural areas where we have higher rates. So, but we would definitely, while we're running the platform, if we find things that are occurring, we would definitely report those.
Yeah, I mean, the VA. I'm glad you brought that up again. It can't always be the VA because things don't work that way. Part of the issues with the VA's reporting is that they have to deal with the fact that a lot of people don't come to see them in their medical care system that are veterans, and you're trying to develop a picture, so to speak, a data set that shows what's really happening with veteran suicide. So it's not an easy thing to do. And the VA, they're really good at looking at their own population of providers to patients, I think. But they have the same challenge as everybody else has. Is that when you go outside the organization, it's very difficult to build an accurate picture. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't really got a good handle on this issue yet. And I recall when I left the Air Force in late 2007, the Army had a suicide every single day on active duty that year. It's 365 Army soldiers dead by suicide that year when we're in the middle of combat and on the ground, and people are not getting killed in those numbers. So it's a tough nut to crack. And I'm glad that you guys are around and you're working this and starting to see some potential success finding some resource providers.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up to what you were saying because it's really important. There is such a focus on veteran suicide, and sometimes we lose fact that it's a problem within the active duty military also. the same methodology, the same data analytics, the same approach can be used for active duty. I mean, it can also use, we look at police officers and firefighters. You look at occupations that have a high propensity for suicide. It can be used, for all of these different use cases. It's not just we're focused on veteran suicide for post 9/11, veterans. The proof of concept. Obviously, we're going to focus, very narrowly, but as we prove the proof of concept, shows good returns, then we can expand it. And once again, that'll be up to the resource sponsor, whomever that may be, to use the methodology and the data analytics platform to do that.
Yeah, and I would just add, in that year, late 2011, it was Vietnam veteran suicides that were the veteran suicide number of 22 a day is the numbers that we were seeing then, so you're right. I mean, you can't just focus on post 9/11 veterans and get the whole picture and help solve crack the nut, so to speak, and get this job done. And that job getting done is to interject sanity into this process, this decision process, so that it doesn't end with a death. It ends with somebody getting the help they need, and I think that's a great thing to embark on, and it's a great objective. It's a humane objective, and I appreciate you guys for what you do. You've not let it go, even though you've faced failures and roadblocks and everything else. And there's something to be said about that. And you want to give it away, for God's sake. Listen up, entrepreneurs and resource providers out there. They want to give this away. They just need to have the resources to do the proof of concept, and then find that entity or set of entities in the contract world that can get it done and scale it. Because this is a big deal. It's not just inside the United States of America, right, Jim? I mean, we have veterans and retirees all over the world that are expats. So, and those are part of those numbers, right?
They are. Let me just say this. If we turned our back on this problem and we walked away, we'd be quitting. And that's, kind of, for me, I can't do that and refuse to do that. And if we're talking about this 2 years from now and we haven't solved the problem, I've failed. And, all of this is done pro bono. It's done out of our own resources, our own, blood, sweat, and tears, although nobody's dying on this one. But it really is important. Personally, my story, individual story. Not many people do. I haven't shared that. I was in Desert Storm on the ground. Did 3 tours in Afghanistan. So I'm very familiar with this issue. And as you have experienced, I have experienced, friends who have taken their lives. And I refuse to say that everything's a mental health issue, or that, if we, just send a veteran out to equines for a veteran, or get them a service dog, or, have them, play with a cat, that it's going to solve the problem. This is a very complex issue that requires out of the box thinking. It's not a mental health issue for everyone. And we have to be able to understand that and look at it from this perspective. And until we change our views on this, we're going to continue to encounter the same problems, and we're going to continue to see suicide rates increase.
I'm afraid you're right on that, but I'm glad that I'm right, that you're no quitter, just like I'm not a quitter, and I'm going to continue to help you get this out until we get successful and get the thing scaled up, and it's covering the veterans population like it should be, because people may not be dying in the office where the program is going on, but people are dying every day that are veterans in this country, and we've got to figure out a way to get to that and intercept that, so that we can get them the help they need, and their families will have them for a long life instead of getting it cut short.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, and you said something really important. A lot of the people we talk to, you have Veterans Suicide Prevention Month, and you have Veterans Day, and it's like, or you have an event happen, or your 9/11 commemoration, everybody appreciates it, but then they go back to work and they forget about it. And that's the tragedy, is because there's a lot of lip service being paid to this and not a lot of action. When I see the first person, take out the pen and write the check, then I'm saying put your money where your mouth is. And
Yeah.
I'll challenge any company. We will provide all of the resources from our end, the data analytics, just get us the funding and we'll do all the heavy lifting.
Well, there you have it, folks. Jim, tell people where they can learn more about this program and Enodo Global before I let you go.
Yeah, it's we posted the Veteran Suicide Prevention Program on our website, www.enodoglobal.com. And by the way, Enodo means to solve, to elucidate. And we look at these challenging problems and we provide solutions. Or you can just contact info@Enodo Global and send us an email, or reach out to me directly. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can contact Rob. I'm not hiding.
No, you're not. And folks, I will pass any contact information you send to me in a request to contact Jim. I'll get it to him as quickly as possible. I'm a one-day turnaround at least, if not just a couple of minutes. He'll tell you that. I may be old and slow, but I'm still reliable. Well, Jim, thank you very much for joining us today, and I appreciate it. I know you've been on before, so it takes time for you to get ready to do these shows and to do them. But this, as you said, this is very important to me also, and we will get it done. Failure is not an option, and we will never quit, never, ever quit on this until we're successful. Thank you. Thanks a lot, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Have a great day. Enjoy the weekend, and God bless.
God bless you, brother. Bye-bye. All right, folks. That was Jim Cisco, veteran, good friend of mine, CEO and founder of Enodo Global Incorporated. Go check them out. They have been working on this program for quite a few years and are ready to get it going. We've got to get this moving. So if you're an entrepreneur or a resource funder out there, get in touch with me at info@robmanus.com or at Jim at info@enodoglobal.com. And we will certainly help get this show on the road for the Enodo Global Veteran Suicide Prevention Program Proof of Concept. Until next week, I'm Rob Manus.